Everyone. Hello and welcome to this English lesson about water. Now, you might think water is a very simple topic, and maybe you know all the words associated with water, but I was surprised when I was putting this lesson together how many words there were and how many phrases, how many English phrases I can teach you when we go over these words. In fact, just this morning, I was thinking of more words, and even Brent from American English with This Guy used the phrase tap water or the term tap water, which I don't have in my slides. I have city water, I think. But there are many things to talk about in this English lesson when it comes to water. So we will get started as soon as possible. As you know, water is one of the most important things in life. Air, water, food, some of the things that keep us healthy, some of the things that keep us alive on this planet Earth. So let's get started in just a moment. So water is called H2O. This is the scientific name, I guess, that you would give water. Water is a molecule. Water is a liquid. And there's a lot of different ways to describe it. H2O stands for hydrogen and oxygen. There's actually 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom that form a bond, and you get a molecule that's called H2O. And if you have enough of those molecules, you can see water. And water is, of course, found all over the planet in a lot of different forms, and we'll talk about a lot of those this morning. This is not a science lesson, so if I get some of the science wrong, please remember this is an English lesson. I'll try my best to explain things correctly. But if you want to make a scientific point in the comments below, certainly do that, and I will read it and I will learn more about the scientific aspect of water. But this is an English lesson, so let's talk about water. There are basically 2 kinds of water found on our planet. There is salt water, which has a high amount of salt in it, and there is fresh water, which is usually fairly clear and clean. It's not always drinkable. Sometimes you need to treat the water first, but it definitely is water that you can use if you need to have a drink after treating it or boiling it or something else. But salt water is generally found in the ocean. We have the Atlantic Ocean, the Pacific Ocean. There are a lot of large oceans in the world, and oceans have salt water. So when you go to the beach, and if you are on a beach that's on the Atlantic Ocean or the Pacific Ocean or another ocean, you are swimming in salt water. You can kind of taste it if you get a little bit of salt water in your mouth, that it has some salt in it. In the rest of the world, there are things like lakes and ponds and rivers, and I'll talk about all of those that have fresh water, water that has a low salt content. It might have other minerals and other impurities in it. Impurities are things that make water not safe to drink. But definitely we have salt water and we have fresh water. Canada in particular has many, many freshwater lakes. We are a country of lakes, as well as parts of the northern United States. There are many, many lakes in North America, as well as in Europe and Russia and many other countries in the world. There are many, many bodies of fresh water. So again, this will be a lot more than just a vocabulary lesson. If you listen to all of the words I just used, I'm regularly using terms and phrases to talk about water that aren't in the slides, that aren't in the 50 slides. So this will be a very rich lesson. It will be very dense and full of information. Bodies of water are things like lakes and rivers and streams. Generally, when I think of body of water, though, I think of like a lake or an ocean or the sea. But let's move on. We have what's called potable water, also referred to as drinking water. So a lot of times you'll see trucks on the road in Canada, and they're delivering water, and they'll actually say on the back potable water. That means that the water that's in the truck is safe to drink. And so I'm not sure why we have this term, why it's potable. The more informal and more common term is to simply say drinking water. So when you go on a trip, you bring some drinking water with you. Okay, so this is water that is safe to drink. In order to get drinking water or potable water, most of the time you will have a water treatment plant close to you. Now, I know it depends on what part of the world you live in. In some parts of the world, you can just drink water without treating it. In Canada, generally all of our water is treated. That means they take water from a lake or stream or river, and it goes through a process to purify the water. So even though I live out in the country, we drink water that has been treated. We go to our local town and we fill up water jugs, and we only drink water that is from the water treatment plant. Now, there's two kinds of water treatment plants. There is a water treatment plant that creates drinking water or potable water, but there's also what's called a wastewater treatment plant, which treats the wastewater that comes out of our houses. So quite a bit of a difference there. A water treatment plant creates drinking water. A wastewater treatment plant treats all of your sewage and everything that comes out of your house. Hopefully that makes sense. But that is how in Canada we definitely have water. And this is true for a lot of countries in the world, but I am aware that there is a vast difference in the world right now. Sometimes people say, if you had 3 wishes, what would your 3 wishes be? And I think one wish that I would have would be this, that everyone in the world had safe drinking water. If we could have a planet where everyone in the world had safe drinking water, I just think it would make me happy, and I think it would be a better planet. So that is something that I definitely support. Let me see here. So water comes to us in some different forms when we have precipitation. Precipitation is any type of water that falls out of the sky. When I look at the weather report for today says possibility of precipitation, 30%. So it might rain later today. So rain is one form of precipitation. And when we get rain, then literally water falls out of the sky. I think we're all familiar with what rain is. Rain is one form of precipitation. Another form of precipitation, this is actually from 2 days ago. Another form of precipitation is snow. And I'm not going to go over all of the details. I'm not going to go over all the different kinds of precipitation, but we have rain, we have snow, we have hail, we have sleet, we have freezing rain. There are many different types of precipitation, but the main two, at least in Canada, are rain and snow. You can also sometimes get water from a spring. On our farm, there's actually a spot where the ground is always a little bit wet because water naturally comes out of the ground. So we have in some places in Canada natural springs. A spring is just a place where water comes out of the ground, and springs are common around the world. Many countries have natural springs. So, and because we're in North America and we're kind of silly, we often put spring water in bottles and then people buy the spring water. So I know that might sound silly to some of you, but North America and other parts of the world are a little bit crazy sometimes. When the sun shines or when you heat water up, it will turn from a liquid into a vapor and it will evaporate. So evaporation is when water turns into a vapor. It turns into what we call steam, and it goes back into the atmosphere. So precipitation is when water comes down from the sky. Evaporation is when water goes back into a vapor form and goes back up into the sky. So water has a freezing point. The freezing point of water is where water turns from a liquid to a solid and we have ice. The freezing point for water is 0 degrees Celsius or 32 degrees Fahrenheit. I hope I got that right. We don't use Fahrenheit very much in Canada, by the way. So when the temperature goes below 0, water will turn from a liquid into a solid and we will get ice. You're familiar with ice if you live in a northern country or if you live in a very southern country. But if you live closer to the equator, you might not have ever seen ice outside. But you've probably seen well, probably not icicles, but I added this because I think icicles are cool. When water drips, and then when it slowly goes below zero, when it goes below the freezing point, then we slowly get little icicles. But you've probably seen ice cubes. So the most common form of water in its solid form would be ice cubes. So that comes about when we go below the freezing point of water. There's also a boiling point. The boiling point of water. The boiling point of water is 100 degrees Celsius or 212 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, I do have to add here, even though it's not a science lesson, those temperatures, I believe, are at sea level. Okay, sea level is like the level of the ocean. So when you go higher or lower on the planet, the boiling point changes and the freezing point changes slightly, which I think can affect baking. I think the baking can be affected by your altitude. Anyways, you have a boiling point where water boils. Often on the stove, you will have a pot of water and you will boil the water. When you want to have a cup of tea, you will boil the water. You will put the kettle on, or you will boil some water for tea. And when something boils, we get steam. So steam is the third form of water. Water can be ice, which is a solid. It can be in its liquid form, which we just call water, or it can be a vapor, which we call steam. Okay. I think vapor is the right word. There's probably another word for it. But remember, I said this wasn't a science lesson. It's just a lesson about water. So we have three forms of water, which we see quite a bit. Let's go over some of the ways we see water in the world. So a puddle is a very small amount of water on the ground after it rains. Okay. So here, when it rains, if we get enough rain, my driveway will have puddles in it. There will be puddles on the side of the road. On some roads, if it's a dirt road or gravel road, the road itself will have puddles. So a puddle is just a small, I was going to say body of water. It's not really called a body of water because that's used to talk about bigger things, but it's a small amount of water that forms in a little part of the earth, and it's usually there after it rains for a day or two, and then it either evaporates or it soaks into the ground, or both, a little bit of both probably. A ditch is something that is man-made. The term man-made means something that people have created. A ditch is something that people make in order to move water from one place to another. Okay. So along the sides of the roads in Canada and in the United States, there are ditches. So they actually create little waterways that can take the water away from that area. In my field, I have a ditch so that water will drain out of the field. So a ditch is a man-made, I was going to say a ditch is a man-made ditch. A ditch is something that's made by humans to move water from one place to another. We also have what's called a canal. So a ditch doesn't always have water in it. It usually has water in it after it rains, and then the ditch, you can see water flowing down the ditch. A canal, though, is something that is man-made as well, and it's a place that usually has water all the time. And a canal often is made to get ships from one place to another. So here where I live, we have what's called the Welland Canal, and it goes from Lake Erie to Lake Ontario. So it is a waterway that was created by humans in order to get large ships from one end from one lake to another. So a canal, if you go to Holland, you'll see many, many canals in some of their cities. The Dutch are really good at digging canals. So we also have small flowing things like creeks, streams, and brooks. Now, the most common word of these three is probably stream. So just so you know, these are all smaller than a river. Okay. I live on what's called, it's the Welland River,